Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz and welcome to a special economic weather report brought to you in association with Bank of New Zealand. Today we look at the Treasury's PREFU, or the pre-election fiscal and economic update. This is put out a few weeks before every election just so that both sides of Parliament, or in fact all political parties, have a clear idea of where the economy is going and what the budget would look like, so that they can set out their economic policies to the electorate. Now the Treasury has come out and said that the budget deficit track is likely to be broadly similar to what it forecast in May. Now this is because even though we've got slower economic growth over the next couple of years than they previously forecast, they've had slightly stronger economic growth in the last 6 months or so. That's because the economic impact of the earthquake in Christchurch wasn't quite as strong as they thought it might be, and also the economic conditions around the world have been a bit slower. But over the next couple of years, Treasury is forecasting that the Christchurch earthquake rebuild will kick in from the second half of next year rather than the first half, so slightly delayed, but that when it does kick in, it'll be slightly stronger than they'd forecast. That's because they've increased the size of the losses estimate from the Christchurch earthquake from 15 billion to 20 billion. Now all of those unders and overs means that the Treasury is saying we're still on track for a budget surplus in 2014-15. Now this is the key thing for the government. They've been saying we're running a tight budget, we want to reduce the current deficit to a surplus by 2014-15 and keep our net debt, that's public debt, as a percentage of GDP below 30%. So broadly, not too much change. The really interesting thing here is in the tone of the comments from the Treasury. Treasury put out a downside scenario in its update and went to the trouble of saying what would happen if we had the worst case scenario globally. It pointed to a potential for a 1.5 to 2% reduction in the economies in Europe and in America, and a slowdown in China from 10% to 6%. It says this would obviously affect commodity prices for New Zealand and increase the size of our current account deficit. Now the end result here is that we would remain in budget deficit right through to the end of the forecast period. And that's obviously a problem for any government that came in, if this indeed happened. Now we asked Bill English in the PREFU lockup about this potential downside scenario and what a national government would do if this actually happened. Now he said he was still pretty keen to get to that surplus of 2014-15, but not at any cost, so he's giving himself some wiggle room there just in case it happens. But my view is that all sides of Parliament should be saying to the electorate what they'll do if we have this worst case scenario. Remember, the PREFU was finalised in mid-October, and since then we haven't had a solution to the European debt crisis. There is the potential for a real problem inside the European banking system and a slowdown both in Europe and the United States, and potentially a slowdown in China. So what would all sides of Parliament do about it? Would they move to a budget surplus on the same time frame? Would that mean they'd have to cut spending and maybe increase taxes? Or would they choose to let the debt go out a bit more, knowing that even though we've had a credit rating downgrade in the last 3 or 4 weeks, it hasn't seemed to have increased our borrowing costs that much, at least yet. So that's the key points from today's PREFU. Yes, we're on track for a surplus by 2014-15, but there is a big downside scenario put at a chance of 1 in 5 of happening in the next couple of years. And what would both National and Labour and the other parties do about it if it actually happened? I'm Bernard Hickey. That was a special economic weather report brought to you in association with Bank of New Zealand.